Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take complex research, streamline it, and basically give you the inside track on important topics. Today, we're doing something really focused, a deep analysis of just one academic paper. It's from 2016, so nearly a decade old now, but foundational. The full title is Global Cost Advantages of Autonomous Solar Battery Diesel Systems Compared to Diesel-Only Systems. I'm going to unpack what they found and, maybe more importantly, why this kind of global comparison was such a big deal back then.
Exactly. And the context for this 2016 study is, well, it's crucial. Before this paper came out, you had lots of, local case studies, pilot projects for mini grids, some quite successful across Africa, Asia.
Right, isolated example.
Isolated, yeah. But this paper, it was different. It really aimed for that first broad, genuinely global comparative look, trying to answer, does this hybrid idea work economically, well, pretty much everywhere it's needed?
And the scale of that need, I mean, it was just huge. The paper states over 1.3 billion people didn't have electricity access when it was
A
published.
staggering number.
And concentrated, right. Mostly rural, remote places, sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, South Asia, low population density areas.
Precisely. And that's the killer for traditional grid extension. Running power lines, building substations. It just gets incredibly expensive when people are spread out.
The economics just don't pencil out for the utilities.
Not at all, so people stay disconnected.
Yeah.
Which is where these off-grid solutions come in.
So the paper set out to compare the old way, basically, sticking a diesel generator in a village with this newer hybrid approach, solar panels, batteries, and still a diesel generator, but working together. What was the main takeaway, the headline finding?
Well, using some pretty sophisticated geospatial analysis, GIS mapping, basically combined with energy systems simulations, they found that, substantial cost savings were possible, specifically looking at the levelized cost of electricity, or LCOE. That's, the average cost per unit of energy over the whole project lifetime. And the finding was clear. The hybrid system generally offered a significant economic advantage over just running diesel generators all the time.
Okay, let's dig into why that shift was needed. For a long time, those standalone diesel systems were the main solution in remote places.
They were. I mean, the tech is mature, relatively simple to operate, and the upfront cost, the initial investment, can seem lower.
But there are big downsides, right?
Oh, huge downsides. You're totally reliant on fossil fuels. That means exposure to volatile global oil prices, expected cost increases over time.
And the environmental cost, obviously, CO2 emissions.
Absolutely high carbon footprint, which wasn't the main focus of this economic paper, but it's a critical factor nonetheless.
And the paper really connects electricity access to broader development, doesn't it? It's not just about lights.
Definitely. It underlines that link. Access to reliable electricity is fundamental for economic progress, for improving lives. They note the correlation between, say, GDP and energy consumption.
And the Human Development Index, the HDI?
Exactly. Better energy access tends to track with better development outcomes. It enables businesses, improves education, healthcare.
So this wasn't a niche issue. The study looked at, 76 countries?
That's right. 76 countries where rural electrification was still below 90%, based on data from around 2013. And that covered about 12,245 million people without electricity. Think places like India, Nigeria, Ethiopia. Massive population, so that global scope was really key.
Okay, let's talk methodology, because that seems like a core innovation here, combining geography with economics in this way.
It really was. They used a geographic information systems, or GIS, approach. Think detailed digital maps. And they combined that with energy system simulation, so they can model and optimize the LCOE for literally millions of different locations simultaneously across the globe.
Wow, okay. And what kind of detail are we talking about on those maps?
Pretty high resolution for a global study. They used a grid, or raster, where each cell was about 16 of a degree. That's roughly 18 kilometers across at the equator.
So detailed enough to capture significant regional differences.
Yeah, exactly. And into this model, they fed all the key cost components for both diesel-only systems and the hybrid ones. Things like capital cost, CapEx, the upfront stuff, operational costs, OpEx, running costs like fuel and maintenance over a 20-year project lifetime. They also used a standard discount rate, a 10% WACC, to account for the time value of money.
And they had to plug in actual costs for the tech. What were the numbers they used back in 2016? We need to remember this is dated now.
Absolutely crucial context. For solar PV, they assumed an initial cost of 1,500 euros per kilowatt peak, kilowatt peak.
Okay.
And for batteries, the cost was set at 350 euros per kilowatt hour.
Per watt. Right. Those numbers are way higher than what we see today.
Dramatically higher. So keep those 2016 figures in mind when we talk about the results. They then calculated the CapEx and OpEx for both system types based on those inputs.
But the real genius seems to be how they handled the fuel costs and OpEx. It wasn't just the national average price of diesel, was it?
No, not at all. Because getting fuel to these remote villages is often the biggest challenge in cost. So they factored in accessibility and transport costs really meticulously.
How'd they do that?
They calculated transport cost based on the national diesel price, yes, but also the fuel consumption of the truck delivering it. And crucially, the travel time needed to reach each specific location.
Ah, travel time, not just distance.
Exactly. They used a global travel time map, a raster, that reflected actual infrastructure, quality of roads, terrain, mountains, rivers, jungles, all the logistical hurdles.
So it captured the reality of hauling fuel drums down bumpy tracks for hours or days.
Precisely. And that's what often makes diesel fuel astronomically expensive by the time it gets to a remote village, sometimes double or triple the national price or even more. That detailed modeling was key.
Okay, so that realistic transport cost modeling must have heavily influenced the results. What was the big headline finding on cost savings?
The overall conclusion was pretty definitive. For most places, the hybrid solar battery diesel systems were just economically better. They calculated a global average LCOE reduction of 14 euro cents per kilowatt hour compared to the diesel-only option.
14 cents per kilowatt. I mean, that sounds substantial. What does that actually mean for, say, a village mini-grid operator?
It's huge. That level of saving can be the difference between needing constant external subsidies just to keep the lights on and actually having a financially sustainable local utility. It lowers the tariff needed from customers, makes the whole thing more viable long term.
And where were the savings the biggest? Which countries really benefited most from switching?
The highest average LCO reductions, we're talking over 40 euro cents per kilowatt saved, were found in countries facing extreme remoteness and already high fuel costs. Think the Central African Republic, Niger, Chad, Malawi, places where just getting fuel there is incredibly difficult and expensive. Local diesel prices could easily be 1 or even 2 euros per liter, mostly due to transport.
Wow. Okay, so if hybrid won big there, where did the old diesel-only system still make sense back in 2016? What was the tipping point?
According to their model, the pure diesel system was only the cheaper option in locations where the final delivered diesel price, including all those transport costs, stayed below 50 euro cents per liter.
50 cents. So once the real cost of it getting fuel there pushed it above €0.5 per liter, the economics flipped in favor of hybrid.
Exactly. The fuel savings from solar started to outweigh the higher upfront cost of the PV and batteries.
And did these savings vary a lot within countries too?
Oh, absolutely. Those subnational differences were massive, driven almost entirely by that transport cost variation. You'd see huge LCOE reduction potential in the remote interior of, say, Peru, or Mongolia, or Colombia, Chad, Indonesia, compared to areas closer to ports or major roads. Remoteness was the key variable.
Makes sense. So if hybrid is cheaper, the next question is technical. What's the best mix of solar and diesel? Given those 2016 costs, how much solar did they find was optimal?
Right, they looked into that optimal configuration. What percentage of the energy should come from PV versus diesel to get the lowest possible LCOE? And it found something interesting. In systems where the solar panel capacity was relatively low, say, below 40% of the total generation capacity, the batteries included were mainly for grid stability.
Stability, like smoothing out power fluctuations.
Yeah, managing things like sudden cloud cover hitting the panels or quick changes in load. They called this the fuel saver configuration. The batteries helped reduce diesel consumption during the day, but weren't primarily for shifting large amounts of energy.
Okay, but most rural places have that big spike in electricity demand in the evening, right? When people come home, turn on lights, TVs cook.
Exactly. The load profile they used in the simulation had that typical strong evening peak. So when you start increasing the PV share, significantly pushing it beyond maybe 45%, you suddenly need much larger battery capacity.
To store that midday solar energy and discharge it during the evening peak, load shifting.
Precisely. You need the batteries to soak up the sun during the day and release it when demand is highest after sunset. Otherwise, you just have to fire up the diesel generator anyway.
So bigger batteries mean higher upfront cost, higher CapEx.
Right. But the trade-off is lower operating cost, lower OpEx, because you're burning much less diesel.
So, considering the high cost of batteries and PV back in 2016, what did the study find was the sweet spot, the lowest LCOE mix?
Based on those 2016 cost assumptions, the LCOE optimized system configuration turned out to be roughly one-third solar PV generation and two-thirds diesel generation.
Wait, hang on, only one-third solar? That seems surprisingly low for a system meant to leverage renewables. Why wasn't it higher?
It really comes down to those 2016 battery costs we mentioned. They were just too expensive back then. To push the PV share significantly higher than one-third required a disproportionately large and therefore very costly battery bank just to handle that evening peak load shifting.
Ah, I see.
So the extra cost of the big battery essentially wiped out the fuel savings you'd get from using more solar. In that 2016 economic model, keeping the diesel generator for about two-thirds of the energy was actually the cheapest way to ensure reliable power,
Huh.
especially covering those evening hours. It was the cost-optimal backup.
Okay, that makes sense in the context of 2016 prices. Let's pivot slightly. The study found feasibility wasn't just about geography and transport costs. Politics played a role too, right? Specifically, fuel pricing.
That's right. Political decisions, especially around fossil fuel subsidies, had a huge impact on the results. One of the key challenges they highlighted was in oil-producing countries, places like Colombia, Nigeria, Angola. They often didn't show massive cost savings from hybrid systems in the model
Why not?
because their governments heavily subsidized diesel fuel. The local price was kept artificially low.
So even if the hybrid system was technically better and cleaner, the subsidized diesel made it look less competitive purely on a financial basis at that time.
Exactly. It distorted the local economics. The paper even touches on how governments should support renewables if they choose to.
What did it suggest?
It noted that subsidies on CapEx, helping people buy the panels and batteries up front, are generally better for long-term sustainability than subsidies on OpEx, like subsidizing the diesel fuel itself.
Why that distinction?
Well, it goes back to that idea of independence. Subsidize the initial equipment, the CapEx, and you empower the community to generate their own power long-term, reducing reliance on fuel imports and ongoing government handouts.
Whereas subsidizing the fuel.
Just keeps them hooked on those subsidies and exposed to global fuel market volatility. It perpetuates dependence rather than building resilience.
Okay. And finally, we need to be clear about what this 2016 study didn't cover, its limitations.
Yes, they were clear about the scope. This was very much a bird's-eye view. It focused strictly on comparing autonomous solar battery diesel mini-grids versus pure diesel mini-grids. It explicitly didn't look at other solutions, like individual solar home systems, SHS, which are much smaller, and it didn't try to calculate the cost or feasibility of extending the main national grid to these areas.
So it wasn't saying hybrid mini-grids are always the best solution everywhere, full stop.
No. It was saying that compared to diesel mini-grids, hybrid offers significant global cost advantages, but the paper stressed that you still absolutely need detailed, localized feasibility studies on the ground before building anything. This provides the high-level economic case. Got it. Okay, let's wrap this up. What's the key takeaway for you, the listener, from this deep dive into the 2016 paper, Global Cost Advantages of Autonomous Solar Battery Diesel Systems Compared to Diesel-Only Systems? Well, back in 2016, the big picture showed clear economic wins for hybrid systems, mostly driven by the incredibly high cost of getting diesel fuel to remote places. But because batteries and solar were still quite expensive then, the most cost-effective mix was surprisingly diesel-heavy, only about one-third solar PV.
Right. And the conclusion really was that pure diesel systems only made economic sense in places with artificially low, often heavily subsidized fuel prices at that time. Given the massive cost reductions we've seen in solar panels and especially battery storage since 2016, well, the economic advantage of hybrid systems has almost certainly grown exponentially. That 14 cents per kilowatt hour average saving is likely much, much bigger now. That's the crucial point, isn't it? The economics are tied to both local logistics and global tech costs and fuel prices. So here's the final thought to leave you with. If one-third solar was optimal in 2016, how dramatically has that calculation shifted today? With PV and battery costs having plummeted, surely systems with much higher solar fractions, even approaching 100% renewable in some cases, are now the most economical choice for bringing power to the millions still living without it. Something to think about. That concludes this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.